This session is about how to develop performance solutions, formerly known as alternative solutions, meeting performance requirements of the PCA. The PCA contains the high-level technical requirements for plumbing work, which are described as performance requirements. Under the PCA, there are 3 ways to meet the performance requirements. The most common method that plumbing practitioners work to is a deemed to satisfy method. This involves following the requirements in the referenced plumbing standards, such as the AS/NZS 3500 suite of plumbing and drainage standards. The second method, provided for under the PCA, is a performance solution, previously known as alternative solution pathway. And the third method is to use a combination of the two, using both a deemed to satisfy and performance solution for different aspects of the work. Performance solutions are in the PCA as a way of encouraging new or innovative solutions by allowing practitioners the option of meeting the mandatory performance requirements in ways not covered by the standards. It is up to the practitioner to decide which approach is most appropriate for the job. If practitioners decide to use the performance solution option, there are a number of requirements that they must meet. The rest of this section will now cover how to meet these requirements, performance requirements. Before we go into the details on this, we wish to acknowledge that it is very complex. As discussed on the last slide, the performance requirements within the PCA establish a benchmark that all plumbing or drainage installations must meet. An example is a cold water service connection requirement under the Cold Water Services section of the PCA. Installations intended to supply cold water for human consumption, food preparation, food utensil washing, or personal hygiene must be connected to the drinking water supply. The performance requirements do not list specific methods, but rather indicate what the system must achieve when completed. Key principles. We'll now look at the key principles of performance solutions. A plumber must decide in advance that they are going to carry out work under the performance solution. It isn't something that is just decided partway through an installation. Performance solutions are not to be used as an excuse for non-compliance. For this reason, a performance solution must be intentional, and therefore it must be planned and designed in advance. As a reminder, you can't use a performance solution to vary out of watermark requirements. Practitioners must complete all the required documentation prior to work commencing, and we'll discuss what documentation is required in a moment. When the work is complete, the compliance certificate must show that a performance solution has been carried out. If it does not, the VBA will assume that the installation was intended to follow the standard and treat any differences from the standards as non-compliance. All documentation must be retained for a minimum of 10 years along with a compliance certificate. The VBA does not require performance solutions to be submitted to them unless requested. The practitioner will need to be satisfied that the performance solution works, as they will be ultimately responsible for certifying the compliance certificate. Key stages. The following stages need to be taken to demonstrate the performance solution will meet the relevant performance requirements in the PCA. The first stage is to prepare all necessary documentation for the performance solution. The second stage is to carry out the installation according to the design. And the third stage is when the installation is complete, you need to identify this on the compliance certificate. Stage 1. Documentation. The first stage is performance solution documentation. Documentation is a key part of any performance solution and must contain the following information to comply with the PCA. This documentation must describe the proposal, scope, purpose, where it is to be installed and type of plumbing work required, identify which performance requirements are applicable to your performance solution. To prove that your performance solution meets the performance requirements, you must use an assessment method. Your documentation must also specify which of the assessment methods you will use to demonstrate compliance. All of this forms the final report. We'll now go through the 4 assessment methods. What are assessment methods? There are 4 methods available to practitioners to prove that they have met the performance requirements. These assessment methods are 1. Evidence of suitability, 2. Verification method, 3. Expert judgment, or 4. Comparison to deemed to satisfy standards. Each one is different with different requirements to prove compliance. Practitioners are free to choose whichever seems best option for them. We'll now look at the method in more detail. Assessment method number 1, evidence of suitability. The following slides are summaries of what is contained in the PCA. For full requirements, please refer to the PCA. One of the assessment method pathways is called evidence of suitability. The evidence of suitability method is used to demonstrate that your performance solution meets the performance requirements. The evidence of suitability method can be met using one or more of the following: a report issued by a recognised expert or a recognised testing authority showing that the performance solution has been tested. The report must show the results and provide evidence that the performance solution is suitable for use in the installation. Or a certificate from a professional engineer or other suitably qualified persons, certifying that the performance solution meets the performance requirements within the PCA. The professional engineer must also set out the basis on which certification is given, including the documents relied upon, or any other form of documentary evidence that correctly describes the properties and performance of the design and installation. The evidence must adequately demonstrate its suitability for use in a plumbing installation. The second assessment method open to practitioners is to use the verification methods listed under each section in the PCA. Assess your performance solution using the verification methods listed in the PCA. An example of this is BV1 cold water services. A. By calculation and certification by persons or organisations with recognised credentials in the design or testing of water service systems, or B. By satisfying the required criteria when tested in accordance with a specified test method by a recognised certification body. Assessment method 3, expert judgment. The third method available to practitioners is to submit your performance solution to expert judgment. What is expert judgment, you ask? Expert judgment is a judgment of a person who has the relevant qualifications and experience to determine whether the plumbing solution complies with the performance requirements. A recognised expert is a person who has the relevant qualifications and experience in the area of plumbing in question that is recognised by the VBA. This level of expertise must be consistent with the complexity of the plumbing solution. The VBA does not make formal or individual determinations on who may call themselves a recognised expert. However, practitioners should be able to deduce what constitutes expert judgment. For example, when designing and installing a performance solution involving fire protection work, the practitioner should consult a suitably qualified fire engineer. Assessment method number 4, comparison with deemed to satisfy provisions. The fourth assessment method is to compare your performance solution to the deemed to satisfy solutions contained in the standards. This method will be satisfied if the proposed performance solution is demonstrated to be at least equivalent to the standard. Assessment methods analysis. No matter which assessment method you choose, your documentation should contain evidence that the performance solution has been analysed and approved by a suitably qualified person. Examples of testing are listed here. Practitioners don't have to undertake all of them for every performance solution. You should simply choose which one is most appropriate for your performance solution. Stage 1, documentation summary. This slide shows a summary of the Stage 1 documentation requirements, which is presented in the form of a final report. The final report will vary depending on the size and complexity of the performance solution. However, every final report should contain the following: the purpose, proposal, scope, etc., relevant performance requirements, assessment method selected, analysis, modelling and/or testing, and a conclusion. Stage 2, carry out installation according to design. The second stage is to carry out the installation. When doing so, practitioners must follow the designs set out in their documentation prepared from Stage 1. Stage 3, describe on a compliance certificate. The above wording is an example of what to include in the compliance certificate to indicate that an installation has been carried out as a performance solution. Copies of all documentation associated with the performance solution, such as test results and expert opinions, must be retained with the compliance certificate for at least 10 years. If a compliance certificate does not clearly indicate that the work has been carried out as a performance solution, the VBA will assume that it is a non-compliant installation. This concludes the key stages and requirements on how to develop a performance solution. Additional resources. There are additional resources available for practitioners seeking further information on performance solutions. These include the ABCB free guidance material on how to develop performance solutions. The VBA has also created an industry guide for Victorian plumbing practitioners, which will be available for download. The VBA strongly advises anyone thinking of undertaking a performance solution to access these resources before starting work.